This conference will now be recorded.
So this is what we are talking yesterday, is that I have two different virtual networks, and I said, or the question that I was asking is that, can I use, let's say, the VM1 that is there in, let's say, virtual network 1, and connect to a VM2 which doesn't have a public IP address. So there is no public IP address, and I said that this connection cannot be done because you have something known as network security group rules. So if I say network security group rules, I have a couple of network security group rules out here with me, and I'm really interested in the VM2 and the VM1 network security group rule. So I have two different things out here. One network security group rule that is there in a location called North Europe, and the other network security group rule that is there in a location called East US. So these are the two things that I'm actually looking at. So let's go into the network security group rules. Let's understand what they are, how do you configure them, and etc. So this is NSG2, and let me look into, let's say, or one thing that I look into is something known as the inbound rules, the outbound rules, the network interfaces, and the subnet. So let's look into that. Let's see this. So I'm going into the inbound security rules, and there are a couple of things that I actually want to go ahead and explore out here. Now there are three rules out here. There are three rules out here that is working at priority 300, 320, 340. So this is a random rule set out here that we have gone ahead and created for RTP, HTTP, and HTTPS, with all of these three as allowed. And there are a couple of more rules out here, which is 6500, 6501, and 6550, wherein I am saying that everything inside a VNet, meaning this is a virtual network with some address space. Okay, so I have a virtual network in North Europe with an address space of, let's say, something like 10.0.0.0/16. So this is the address space where my virtual network is, and ideally my virtual machine is going to be an address called 10.0.0.0 or 10.0.0.4. This is the address where my virtual machine is in. If I create another virtual machine here in an address called probably 10.0.0.5, or I create another virtual machine inside the same virtual network with any address within this particular address range, meaning this virtual machine can have an address ranging from 10.0.0.6 to 10.0.255.255. This is the address range that this particular virtual machine can have. I'm just giving a very broad perspective. So all the virtual machines that are between this particular address ranges can talk to each other without me having to tell them to talk, meaning without me having to go ahead and tell them that, you know what, talk to each talk to each other, or let's say give a rule explicitly. So I'm not giving any rule explicitly out here. All these virtual machines can talk to each other, meaning all the resources that are there in the same virtual network can talk without any issues, because I have a rule here which says all VNet inbound, meaning whatever is there inside the VNet, please make sure it is allowed at 65,000. And I also said that, okay, fine, there is also something known as 65001, which says whatever is the traffic which is coming from the Azure load balancer. So whatever was the traffic that is coming from the Azure load balancer. So when we did an Azure load balancer, let's see, where's that? Yes, when we did an Azure load balancer, we configured a couple of things like NAT rules and etc. So we were able to perform an RDP connection using the IP address of the load balancer into the virtual machine which did not have an IP address. So no IP. We were able to do this because of this particular rule out here, which says allow the load balancer, meaning whatever is, let's say, the load balancer traffic, please go ahead and allow it. And sorry, I'm saying please deny everything apart from whatever that I have declared above. Now the execution of these rules is something like this. It depends upon the priority, meaning lesser the priority, greater is the rule capacity, meaning greater is, let's say, the rule execution count. So let's do this. Now I have this VM2 NSG basically attached to a virtual machine called VM2. So let me go into that particular virtual machine too. So let me go into VM2 out here. And I take this rule out and I just take the IP. I'll say MSTSC and I'll just log into this particular IP out here. Now it's telling me that it's giving me this screen which is telling me that yes, I'm able to do an RDP inside it. And the reason that I'm able to do an RDP, the reason I'm able to do this is because I have an RDP rule that is defined at, let's say, 300, which has a greater priority and which has, let's say, an action called allow. Now let me do one thing. Let me add another rule out here. Let's say at 100. So I'll say this is service called RDP and I'll say this is 100. I'll say port 3389 deny. I'm saying add. Sorry, I just allowed this. Let me go into it. I'll say deny. I'll say save. So it says rule is created and updated and etc. So if I look into this right now, there are two rules contradicting each other, meaning I have port 3389 to be denied at a priority called 100, right? And at the same time what I did is that I added another rule called 300 which allows the RDP traffic. So what should happen here, guys? Anyone? I have the same rules, meaning I am contradicting my own self. I am saying at 100 please deny it, at 300 please allow it. So let's look into that on what happens ideally. So let's go into the VM2 again. Let's take this IP. Let's see what will happen here. So it's the same IP of the virtual machine, but do you see what is happening right now? It's saying remote desktop connection is not configured and etc. It was working earlier, right? No, it isn't. The reason being, I have an RDP deny rule at a priority called 100, which is greater than 300. Because 100 is a lesser priority meaning more weightage or more prevalence to this particular rule out here. So I have a rule at 100 which says deny, I have a rule at 300 which says allow. My 100 will override the 300, meaning Azure will come from here and it says, okay, fine, you know what, 6550 they're saying it is deny all, so I will deny all the traffic. Then it says, okay, fine, I will go to a lesser priority, see what it is. Okay. So after deny, they are saying allow the load balancer. So I'll deny everything, but I'll allow the load balancer. Then it says, okay, 56550, I mean 65,000. It's allow all VNet inbound. So they are saying it is deny all. So I denied all. I allowed the load balancer. I'll also allow all the VNet inside inbound traffic. And at 340, which is a more lesser priority, I see there is HTTPS. I'll allow it. So I am overruling all my deny condition out here. I'm saying allow, allow, allow. I'm saying also HTTP. I'm saying it is allow, which is 80, which is great. Then I said 300 RDP. I said allow. Until here it is fine. I also now gave a rule here telling 100 and denying. This rule now will override the earlier rule of 300. So lesser the priority, greater is the weightage to the rule. So here I said it is deny and then I'm doing an allow out here. So it will of course get denied. So just in case if I do this, if I say go into the rule and if I take the priority as let's say somewhere around 400, okay, I'll say now if you see I've changed the order of priority wherein I said that the RDP at 300 should allow, it is allowed, and again at 400 it is denied. So what should happen here, guys? It should allow, right? It should be able to go in. So let's go inside this, and it might take somewhere around 2 to 3 minutes in order for the rule to get in effect. Right now, it is giving me the option to go ahead and enter this password. So I am able to establish a remote desktop connection inside the virtual machine that I was working on. The reason I'm able to do this is because I changed the priority. Is because I went ahead and changed this particular priority out here. So let me deny, I mean, let me delete this out. I don't need this rule. So this rule that I declared at 400 will never even come into action because I'm overriding it with a priority or a lesser priority of 300 where I am allowing the RTP. Is this okay, guys? Are you able to follow this? Any questions still here? Okay. So the same applies to all the outbound rules also. You can declare the priority, and very importantly, no two rules can have the same priority. No two rules can have the same priority number. So if I do again an add, I'll say RDP and I'll say 300. It will automatically throw this error telling that you know what, the I cannot add another priority of you with the same number. You cannot do that. It can be 301. This is okay. So it can be 301 and the number can go up to 65,550. This is or 65,500. This is let's say the order, or this is let's say where you need to declare things out here. Now one more thing out here that I want to just call out is that there are two things out here: a network security group rule. So let me see if I have a diagram for the network security group rules out here. Okay, I'm not finding it right now. Yeah, got it. Now two things out here is that a network security group rule can be attached either to a network interface card or to the virtual network, or let's say to the subnet of the virtual network. or to the subnet of the virtual network. That's the reason if I go here, it says what are all the network interface cards that are attached. So it says there is one network interface card that is attached, and it says what are all the subnets that are attached to it. Meaning, if there are no subnets that are attached, I can say associate, and I can select the subnet and attach this particular network security group rule like this. So I can attach and I can detach. And any guesses on how many subnets that I can attach here? Anyone? Guys online? Any guesses here? So how many subnets can I attach here to one particular
Two
network
hun-
security?
two- 248,
I'm sorry,
248, 255, 256.
that is the number of virtual machines. But the thing is that I can attach any number of subnets out here. I can do that. I can attach any number of subnets provided the subnet and the network security group rule are in the same region. It's a regional resource. So provided, so I can add any number of virtual networks or any number of subnets to this particular network security group rule. And the thumb and the thumb rule is that all the virtual machines attached to that particular subnet. So in my case, this subnet is 10.0.0.24, which means it can hold up to 251 virtual machines. All the 251 virtual machines that are attached to this particular subnet will follow this particular network security group rule concept, or will follow whatever that I declare in this particular network security group rule. Now I don't want this to happen. This is not ideal. I want to just attach one network security group rule per a virtual machine, because I have 10 virtual machines which needs 10 different requirement. In that case, I will attach my network security group rule to the network interface card and attach the network interface card to the virtual machine. Usually, the the mapping between the network interface card and the virtual machine is a one-to-one mapping. So one network interface card is attached to one particular virtual machine in that way. So if I have a network security group rule attached at the subnet, all the virtual machines that are created inside the subnet will go ahead and follow that particular rule set. If it is attached to the NIC card, only the virtual machine that is attached to this particular NIC card will follow this particular network security group rule. And I can associate and disassociate. So I have associated a subnet. I can also say disassociate this one out. So I can add, remove multiple subnets. There is no restriction. The only restriction is that both the network security group rule and the subnet or the network interface card that you're attaching this to should be in the same region. Is this okay, guys? Are you all able to follow this out? Any questions that I can take till here? Okay, so lastly, let's go here. So this is where I am. I have two virtual machines with me. VM1 that is sitting in a region called East US. So it will of course have a different VNet. So the VM1 has a different VNet out here with no public IP. I do not have a public IP for this particular virtual machine. I disassociated the public IP for this virtual machine. And of course, I have the VM2, which is in North Europe, that is sitting in a different virtual network. And this has a public IP. So let's do one thing. I know for a fact that this particular public IP or the RDP to this machine is working because I have done that many times. So let me put this in and let me give a Microsoft -07 password. and the RDP is working because it's able to log into this machine and it's whatnot. It's giving me everything. So the RDP is working all fine. But what if I go here and I don't have a public IP right now? I only have a private IP to this machine. What if I, as a user, copies the private IP and tries to do an RDP into this? Will this work? Yes, no, maybe. Anyone, any guesses?
No.
No. Any other answers there? So if I do that, let's see. I'll say connect. And no matter how many times I do this, it will throw the same error. Okay, so let me do one thing. The first thing that I do, if something like this error comes up, I'll go into the networking and I'll see whether you have an RDP enabled or not. Now you don't have an RDP enabled. Let's do one thing. Let's go ahead and add an RDP rule here. I'll say service is RDP. Priority is 100. I'll just say port 3389 allow. So I am adding an RDP rule out here at 100, which is allowing it. So let me refresh my screen. And so the question again, now if I take the private IP and do an RDP into it, will it allow me to do an RDP? So I have the private IP again. I have enabled the RDP right now. If I place it and now try to do an RDP, will it allow? Yes, no, maybe. Anyone? Online, offline, anyone? Yes, the can I? Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't get that. So is it yes, no, maybe? Any inputs from you all guys? Anyone as such?
It will allow, I think. We have enabled, right, in RDP. So it will
Mm-hmm.
allow it.
So let's just try this out. Let me test out my theory. So I have allowed an RDP connection, and let me now hit the connect button. It threw an error. Now, whatever you do, I did allow, but whatever you do, it won't let you connect to a virtual machine over a private IP out here. This is a private IP in nature, and I am coming from a public IP address. This is the IP from where I am working, and this is the IP of the virtual machine that I'm trying to connect. This is private in nature. This will not allow, or this, I mean, whatever you do, this will not allow at this particular state. I mean, you need to do something else to, kind of allow this out. We'll look into that. But in this state, a virtual machine, no matter how many rule sets that you have here, no matter how many rules that you add here, it will not allow you to go ahead and connect to a virtual machine over over its private IP. You need a public IP to basically have a connect. But let me do one thing. I'm already logged into VM2. Now the question is that I am into VM2. VM2 has a public IP. So I am into VM2. I have already done an RDP session into the VM2. Now, can I use the VM2 and do an RDP session into VM1 over the private IP of VM1? Can I do this using VM2? Because I am already inside VM2. I can go inside VM2. There is already an RDP software installed on VM2. Can I use this, take the IP and take the private IP of VM1, and can I connect to that particular machine? Yes, no, maybe. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Any different answers there? Does anyone, I mean, I had two answers that are yes, but does anyone feel that I cannot do this? Okay, so if it is yes, then why it is a yes?
So it is inside the virtual, right? It's already V2. It's the public, right?
Okay, yes, V2 is a public IP. I am already inside V2. Now I'm already inside VM2. From
Mm.
VM2, I want to now connect to VM1. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, VM2 is in North Europe. VM1 is in East US. So this is what I started with, right? So if I just duplicate this tab, and if I just open up all the virtual machines that I do have, so these are two different virtual machines running out of two different regions out here, meaning these are two different virtual machines which are a part of two different virtual networks as such. Because I cannot have one single virtual network that can host East US and North Europe also. I cannot do that. So again, now can I use this private IP to connect to VM1 from inside or from within VM2 over the private IP of the VM1? Yes, no, maybe.
If it is same virtual network, it will be possible. It is different right now. It is not possible.
So it's a different one. So let me test that out. And I'll say connect. So no matter how many times I do this, it won't let me do that because, as someone rightly said, this is a different virtual network. This is VNet 2. This is VNet 1. And virtual networks are isolated entities. They live in their own, let's say, isolated land. So virtual networks are isolated entities. They provide isolations. And very importantly, if I go into VM1, into the networking section of the VM1, there is a rule called 6550 which denies all inbound but will allow, let's say, all the virtual network inbound, meaning everything inside the virtual network is allowed. Load balancer is allowed, but anything apart from these two, everything is denied. I don't care whatever you are, everything is denied. So virtual network 1 has a different address than virtual network 2. So by default, this connection will not be there. I cannot force VNet or I cannot force VM2 to talk to VM1. I cannot do that by default. But if let's say you are hell-bent on doing this, let's say you want the VM2 to talk to VM1 because both the machines are inside your organization, of course, different virtual networks, but they need to communicate with each other. In this case, what we'll do is that we go into a concept called peering. Peering, peering just means that I'm just connecting both the virtual networks, VNet 2 and VNet 1. It just means that I'm just connecting both the virtual networks out here. Meaning what? How do I do it? Is let me go into a virtual network. So let me type in virtual network. I have two virtual networks right now, one in North Europe, the other in East US. I can go into any of those ones. Like I can pick any of the virtual networks. So I'll just pick up the East US virtual network, and in here I'll just say peering. In the settings, I have something called as peering. So I'll say peering, and I'll say add a peering connection. I'll say the peering link name is East US to North Europe. So I am laying a connection between the East US and the North Europe virtual networks. I'm saying allow. I'm also saying allow forwarded traffic. Please allow this out. And it's asking me what is, again, it's telling me what is peering link name. It's asking me, okay, fine, there is a connection between East US to North Europe. Do you also want a connection between North Europe to East US? It's a two-way channel. It's not a one-way channel. I can say it is North Europe to East US. This is how I'm establishing the connection. And it is telling, okay, fine, can you select a virtual network that you want to establish a connection with? I'll say, okay, fine, it is this, I believe. Yes, it is VM1 underscore group underscore hyphen VNet. This is the name of the virtual network that I want to connect to. And I'll say add. As in when I do add, right, it's adding two things out here. If you look at this carefully, it's adding North Europe to East US and also East US to North Europe. So in the East US virtual network, now this is the East US virtual network out here. So let me give it a second. And let me just refresh the screen out. It says connected. So this is the East US network. So if I go here, in the East US network, I have established a connection from East US to North Europe. And if I go if I go back and look into the North Europe virtual network, now I haven't come here, right? I did not come here. I did not do any change here. But there is already appearing from North Europe to East US because this is the reason why. If you look, when I said add, it added two things, and East US to North. It went ahead and added these two things out here. Now if I go here, I'll say okay, I'll say connect. Now it's asking me for the credentials. I have done an RDP from VM2 over its public IP to VM1 over its private IP. And if I just scroll this towards left, I have two virtual networks connected to each other. And I am inside the VM2 and I establish an RDP to VM1 over its private IP from VM2. Meaning if I just minimize this, I have the RDP session established. So this is what I am doing at this point. So I have two virtual networks and I've paired them together. Now VM1 and VM2 can now start communicating with each other over this particular peer link. Any questions still there, guys, on what this is and why did we do this and etc.
Hi, Kiran.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, can we block network peering, like peering using NSG rules?
I didn't get your question. I'm sorry. How? What do you want to do?
Can we block the connection of peering concept by using network security group rules?
You cannot do that because peering is itself to unblock network security group rule. So meaning
Okay.
there was a network security group rule. I just wanted to allow something from the network security group rule. So peering is a link that will just bypass your NSG. So if you say block, then you just need to delete the peering link. That's it.
Okay.
Any more
Yes.
questions here, guys?
Uh, Kiran, so that means we have actually did the peering two ways, right? North Europe to East US and East US to North Europe. So if we do it only one way peering, so we'll be able to connect only one way, not the other way.
Right. If we do a one-way peering, we will only be able to connect one way. Meaning, if I come here, now it is North Europe to East US peering link out here. If I come here, there is an option to block the traffic. So if I block this out, it's only so it's telling that what resources in VM1 cannot communicate to the resources in VM1 hyphen something. Meaning, resources, all the resources that are there in North Europe, meaning virtual machines in North Europe, now cannot communicate with East US, but virtual machine in East US can communicate with North Europe. This is a one-way peering link.
Uh,
Does that answer your question, Farun?
yes, yes. So that this means this concept is used when in a real world this concept is used. Can you tell me where this concept one way peering is used only when only one person is allowed to connect to the other, like solving
Correct.
IP.
So something like this. So if I have to, kind of, give you a use case scenario of a one-way peering.
Mm-hmm.
So let me say that you have a virtual machine that is sitting, let's say, in a region called East US. Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
this virtual machine is a web server, meaning you have, let's say, installed something like IIS and you converted this virtual machine into a web server. And my office came up in another region called North Europe. So I have an office, let's say, in Netherlands, which is, let's say, in some part of the Europe out there. I have another virtual machine, but this is not a web server. But let's say this is a database server, which is holding sensitive data. Now, by default, I don't need this database server to communicate with the internet or communicate with anything. But I want my web server to interact with my database server over the peering link. So only this way connection or only this connection between this particular virtual machine to this virtual machine is allowed, but the database server should not communicate with the web server because I cannot expose this particular database server on the internet. So in this case, I will just establish one peering link, not this one. Only from East US to, let's say, North Europe is something that I want to establish a communication and not the other way around. So this is, let's say, a specific use case scenario wherein you want to block the traffic or wherein you want to block the communication between the two to one and only allow communication from one to two. Does that answer your question, Fanny?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much.
Any more questions that I can take here, guys? Okay, so let's do one thing. So we covered like a good amount of concepts till now. So let's write down most of the concepts that we covered and we'll just highlight what are the portions that you need to kind of really look into, and what kind of an interview questions that you can get, so that you are better prepared for that. So let me open up my notepad. So in virtual networks especially, or in virtual machines, or in the entire networking concepts, the very minute question can be like, what is a VNet? And another question is that my VNet has an address space of 10.0.0.0/16, and I have a subnet with 192.168.0.0/24. Can I do this? This is no, a very strict no, because VNet and the subnet must have this almost the same kind of a same address space out there. Secondly is that I have a subnet of 10.0.0.0/24, and I can connect, let's say, 256 virtual machines to this. Is this statement right?
No,
Anyone? Yes, no, maybe?
no,
No. So how many can I really connect here?
250 will be,
255.
sorry,
250?
5.
Okay. Okay, so 255, but even 255 is not the right answer. It is 251,
1,
because Azure takes up 5
5.
subnets by
Yeah.
default. So it is 256 minus the 5. So it is always 251.
10.
So this might be a tricky question that the interviewer can pose, is that, what this is, let's say, the subnet address space. How many do you think I can, kind of put into it? Secondly, network security group rules. What do you mean by network security group rules? Where did you use it? Why did you use it? And etc. This can be one of the questions, or this can be the areas where the questions can really come up from. Then virtual network peering is that, what do you understand by the concept of a virtual network peering, and where did you really use this virtual network peering, and how did you really use this virtual network peering? Can you please explain about this, and etc. Then coming to virtual machines, couple of things like, how do you install IIS on a virtual machine? So your answer is like, I go do an RDP inside the virtual machine. There is something known as server manager dashboard. We add roles and features, and we add one specific role known as web server. Now the interviewer stops you and tells you that, okay, fine, hold on, not that way. I don't have a public IP. Now how do you install IIS? I still want the IIS to be installed. This is like, these are the interview questions what they really ask you out here. So can anyone help me out here? So I don't have a public IP, but I want to install the IIS server on the virtual machine. So what should I do here?
Like using PowerShell script, you
By
can
using
install.
PowerShell script. So specifically by using something known as a run command, or a custom script extension. This is specific answer, that I use a run command or a custom script extension in order to get the IIS installed on the virtual machine. Secondly, how did you create the virtual machine? Did you use the portal, or did you use any kind of automations? You can say you have used ARM or Terraform, which we'll be looking at in later classes. Basically, spin up, or basically create multiple virtual machines out here. So from an infrastructure perspective, these are most of the questions that an interviewer can ask you from a virtual network concepts or a virtual network point of view. And these are a couple of things on virtual machines point of view. And my suggestion would be to look at automation, meaning whatever you're creating, please use either a PowerShell or an ARM or a Terraform once we learn about it. So these are the areas that I want you all to look into, because normally it's not a big task to go ahead and create the virtual machine from the portal, but it requires a bit of knowledge to create it using one of these technologies or one of these tools out here, especially when you introduce something like iteration, like creating multiple virtual machines using copy indexing and etc. This is where the challenge actually comes in. So these are the areas that I want you all to kind of look into. And these are the questions that can kind of come in. So any questions for today, guys, before we close? Anything for today? Okay, so we're good to close, guys. If there are no questions, we're good to close. And again, wish you all a very happy new year. Hope you have a very safe one, and we'll meet on Monday. Until then, have a great one, guys. Thank you.
Happy New Year, Kiran.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kiran.